What's up, Raider Nation? It's a wonderful day to be alive and a wonderful day to talk about someone who I truly believe is the ultimate Raider, Mr. Saunders. Most people know him as the Raiders offensive coordinator in 2011, but there's way more to the story, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. I go by Millennial Raider. If you're into Raider content just like this, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Let's get into it. So our boy Peltz sat down with Saunders for an interview. In a previous video, I said that we'd be breaking it down, and here we are. But before we get into the interview clips, let's talk resume. Saunders basically coached between the NFL and college for about 55 years. In 2000, he won the Super Bowl with the Rams under Dick Vermeil. So legend in his own right. Of course. On a personal note for me, I met him back in 2012 at the Marriott in Napa. We were able to have breakfast together. One of the nicest people I've ever met. Very excited to talk about this because I learned a lot more about him. So let's get into this interview. Al starts talking about being born in the UK and that his family immigrates to the US in the 1950s. His family is on a boat with another family who has a house in Piedmont. That's the same city where John Madden would eventually retire. It's pretty cool hearing those stories, right? John Madden and Al Saunders don't really run into each other anymore in these stories. It's just cool, like knowing that, city that exists still, right? All these Raider legends are just kind of finding their own path in that world, right? Anyways, that family ends up sponsoring Al Saunders' family to, come to the United States, which was pretty cool. And so Al Saunders arrives to Oakland in 1954, 5 years before the Raiders existed. Destiny. He talks about his first live sporting events, loving baseball, watching the Padres, then the Giants came to San Francisco, so he watched them. And then Peltz asked about the Niners, and this is why we love Al Saunders.
But I was never really a 49er fan because they were in San Francisco,
Right.
and you live in Oakland, you're an Oakland fan.
Right. Damn right. You don't cross the bridge, all right? Now, this is the part that blew my mind. Al talks about the first seasons being in San Francisco. As a kid, he couldn't really afford to get into the game, so he had to sneak into games.
The security wasn't real great in those days, and we didn't have any money to get in any games, but a couple of my buddies and I were able to sneak into Kezar because we kind of knew the ins and outs of the stadium there. And we climbed the fence at Candlestick Park, and I watched just about every Raider game in 60 and 61.
So then he gets away with it the first two seasons. The Raiders eventually move to Oakland, and he tries it again, and this is what happens.
They built Frank Ewell Field in Oakland, where Laney College is right now. And a friend of mine by the name of Johnny Mattis, story short, we climbed over the fence. It was like 10:30 in the morning. We had no money. How do you get into watch a pro game? And actually got caught by a guy by the name of Dick Romansky. Well, long story short, Dick was the equipment man for the Oakland Raiders. And so he says, well, if you're going to come to the game, you're going to have to work. So we said, that'd be great. So he take a child's dream, takes us in the locker room, says, start emptying out these crates, put the numbers up with where they belong on the hangers. So long story short, Johnny Mattis and I were ball boys for the Oakland Raiders in 1962, which was the first year at Frank Ewell Field, and that was Marty Feldman was the head coach then at that time. And then the next year, 1963, Al Davis became the head coach.
1962, he became a ball boy. In 1963, the Raiders hire Al Davis as head coach. Two legends named Al are finally paired together. This is Raider history, Raider destiny, right? So then Peltz asks a heartfelt question. What was it like to come back and coach for your city, right? Your team. But then he dropped something crazy that I have a little bit more questions about.
Yeah, it was really special. I think anytime you grow up in a place and you feel a real affection for, the pro team, it's really a special moment. In fact, in 2003, Mr. Davis offered me the head job there. I was with Kansas City. Dick Vermeil came back to Kansas City and asked me to join him as the coordinator, and I did. And we had some real good years in that 2001 to 2003. Mr. Davis had interviewed me for the job, and we went through a contract discussion and some other details, and it just was. It was difficult to leave Kansas City at the time. We were the number one team in in the league in offense.
Let's kind of talk about it. Al Davis wanted Al Saunders as head coach. He said in 2003. 2003, that means that we'd be just coming off the Super Bowl loss. Al Davis was ready to move on from Bill Callahan right away. I don't know how true that is. I'm thinking maybe he meant 2002 after we traded John Gruden, that he wanted, Al Saunders to come coach for us. But maybe we can ask him one day. Fast forward to 2005, Al Davis calls Al Saunders again.
And then 2 years later, in 2005, Mr. Davis interviewed me again and almost took the job at that time, but had an opportunity to go to Washington with Joe Gibbs.
And instead, we ended up with Norv Turner. Like, can you imagine Al Davis just not letting it go and wanting you to be a head coach, and you just have the balls to say no to Al Davis? It's crazy. Al versus Al. It's fun times. Then in 2011, Hugh Jackson becomes the head coach of the Raiders and gives a call to Al Saunders, who they had a relationship when Hugh Jackson was in Baltimore. He wants Al to be our offensive coordinator. Al Saunders is a little hesitant. Baltimore Ravens have something going on, and he's saying we might win the Super Bowl, which they did win the Super Bowl. He wasn't feeling the move. He was very comfortable where he was at. He, I think, went from the Redskins to the Ravens, and he was able to stay in the same home because the commute was, pretty similar from where he lived. But then Al calls and he says this.
Mr. Davis called again, and his comment was to me, he says, Alan, he always called me Alan, just like my wife called me Alan. Alan, and I'll never forget, he goes, time for you to be a Raider. And I said, Mr. Davis, I have a great situation here in Baltimore. It's a great team and loyalty is really important to me. And he said, Alan, I gave you your first job in the NFL in 1963. He says, I'm going to give you your last job in the NFL. He says, you need to come out and help Hugh. And he said, I'm not doing well health-wise.
And I mean, I'm sure that call gave him chills. Hearing that story gave me chills, right? Al really wanted him and was using his final card to get him, which it worked, right? Al Saunders said yes, joined the Raiders in 2011. This one is really personal to me because the 2011 offense was a very fun offense to watch the first couple weeks, right? Actually, at the end, too, it was fun. We just had a couple curveballs. But the 2010, 2011 Raiders means a lot to me just because, we went through so many losing seasons and it was finally like almost a normal team, a mid-tier team, right? And so it was fun to watch. I think that was when I started like going to games more consistently. At the end of the 2010 season versus the Colts, I was walking to Will Call to get my tickets and a limo pulls up and it was Al Davis. He comes out, he gives us a speech. My world is shook. That next offseason is where he wasn't doing well. And he called Al Saunders, who came and lit up this offense. Cool to see those two guys just kind of give it their all on a season that really meant a lot to me. So then Al Saunders starts talking about that season and talking about how, midway through the season, Al did end up passing. We all know the 2011 Browns game, first game without Al Davis with us. Jason Campbell breaks his collarbone. The next week we trade for Carson Palmer. So Peltz asks about the transition from Jason Campbell to Carson Palmer.
Yeah, that was really difficult. Jason Campbell, I coached for 50 years and had some really great quarterbacks. I mean, the Joe Montanas and the, Kurt Warners. We had Jason when I was with Joe Gibbs in Washington. Jason was really special, I thought. Al Davis had called me. I was still with Washington, and he asked about Jason Campbell. He was going to trade for him. And I said, Jason Campbell, in the right environment, the right situation, will be an outstanding quarterback.
Al Saunders immediately gives Jason Campbell his flowers. Then he talks about the Kansas City game.
So he comes in like on Wednesday, and we're trying to prep him for the game, and we weren't doing real well. And I guess it was against Kansas City. I can't remember the first game he played. Fortunately, Carson is a tremendous football player. He's extremely bright. And he picked up the offense because it was similar to what he'd had in Cincinnati. And he finished the game against Kansas City. Didn't play real well, but most guys couldn't even call a play in the huddle. Being there 3 days.
And so for those of you who don't know, this Chiefs game was a breaking point for a lot of us. Well, for me personally, during this Raiders season, right? Al dies, Jason gets hurt, we trade for Carson, and then Darren McFadden gets hurt this game. Like it was such a promising start of the season, and then it all just started falling apart. And then he talks about the game that we love so much, right, where Carson Palmer went to San Diego and just went crazy with Denarius Moore. That game, I think we lost Jacoby Ford. Like it was, what could have been that season, He talks about that game. That game was very fun. Then some of our Millennial Raider favorites start getting their flowers. Peltz asked about Marcel Reese.
Yeah, Marcel could have been a Pro Bowl wide receiver or tight end movement back player.
Incredible.
He could catch the ball extremely well. And once again, really a bright player, often had ideas in the running game that he would like to see done. And we incorporated a lot of those at some time. But Marcel was special.
Peltz asked about Darren McFadden.
Darren was probably one of the most competitive guys that I was ever around in the 38 years I was in the league. He was tremendously talented, but he was so competitive and played as physical as anybody I'd ever been around. He had a great period in his career for us. He was really productive. He could catch the ball. He could run the ball. He was really a talented guy. He reminded me a little bit of a guy that we had in San Diego and that I'd coached at Cal, a guy by the name of Chuck Muncie.
Then Denarius Moore.
He could run by people. He was a young, developing player. He learned how to run, be a better route runner as he grew older. But he could catch the ball and he could get by people and he could run. He was the kind of receiver that Al really, really liked.
And do you still keep in touch with a lot of those Raider players?
Not a lot of them. I went to Hayward Bay's wedding in San Francisco a few years back. 50 years of coaching, multiply those 50 years by 60 to 100 players in training camp and in a team. But Jason, we've talked about Jason Campbell. Of all the players that were with the Raiders during that time, I still stay in contact with Jason.
And we got a little DHB action, right? We love to see it. Still keeping in touch with Jason Campbell. It's nice to see that locker room was, tight. Then Peltz asked about Derek Carr.
That would be another real special Raider and a special guy. He was special in our heart. He was from Bakersfield. Right. And my wife was born and raised in Bakersfield. They went to the same high school. So she loved Derek Carr instantly. There was an instant connection there. I was very, very high on Derek as a college player. I thought he would be an outstanding pro and gave him very high marks during the evaluation process during that draft. And we were really excited when we were able to get Derek. And he's a special guy. Had a great career there with the Raiders.
Then Al talks about visiting Las Vegas and walking through Allegiant Stadium.
A couple of years ago, I went to a game in Las Vegas with the Raiders. And it was a game that they were honoring all of the Hall of Fame players. There were Art Shell was there, Fred Biletnikoff, Marcus Allen, all the guys that were Hall of Fame players. There was a bunch of them there. And I go down on the field just to say hello to Marcus and Freddie and Art Shell and some of those other people. And Derek comes running over from in the middle of warmups, comes over, gives me a big hug, says, "Hey, Coach, thanks for coming to the game." He's that type of a guy.
Think about this for a second, right? He was there before Al Davis. He was there at the very first game, the first 2 seasons, when they played at a high school field in San Francisco. And now he's standing on their permanent home in Vegas. That is incredible. Such a full circle moment. I really wish we would have made a bigger deal out of this than we did. Let me ask you this, Raider Nation. Should the Raiders find a way to honor Al Saunders? Because if anyone represents Raider loyalty, culture, and history, it's him. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. I'm out. Peace.